Nobody believed the human could hear the station dying. That was the first mistake. The second mistake was assuming that because he did not shout, threaten, or reach for a weapon, he had accepted the verdict. The third mistake was sealing Bay 12 with his friend still inside. My name is HFY Valine, and I was the senior incident recorder aboard Meridian Spindle, which sounds much more impressive than it was. My job was to sit behind reinforced glass, collect sensor logs, timestamp disasters, and survive long enough to explain afterward why everyone more qualified than me had been wrong. My species, the Lithari, are built for caution. We have 3 hearts, translucent skin, long fingers, and a nervous system that starts preparing funeral rituals whenever a door closes too loudly. We do not enjoy danger. We do not chase glory. We document it from a safe distance, preferably with tea. Meridian Spindle was not a warship. That is important to understand. It was a border relay station, a huge rotating ring built between 3 trade corridors, where merchant convoys, diplomatic vessels, refugee transports, survey crews, and military escorts all passed through on their way to somewhere more important. The official brochure called it a symbol of interspecies cooperation. The maintenance crews called it a miracle held together by lawsuits. Both were correct. The station orbited a dead blue star called Vare. Dead stars are supposed to be quiet. Vare was not. Every 37 days it shed electromagnetic storms powerful enough to boil unshielded ships from the inside. The Spindle was built to predict those storms, regulate traffic, and keep everyone alive. That was the idea, anyway. On the day everything changed, we had 14,000 civilians aboard, 900 docked ships, 3 political delegations, 1 sleeping ambassadorial brood cluster, and a cargo hold full of medicinal spores that would become explosive if anyone looked at them with sufficient disrespect. We also had 1 human. His name was Elias Rowe. He was not a captain, not an admiral, not a decorated hero. He was a civilian systems engineer, 3rd contract class, temporary station support, assigned to coolant maintenance and emergency routing. In other words, the kind of person most officers ignored until the lights went out. Elias was not tall by galactic standards, barely 6 feet in his work boots, brown skin, dark hair always tied back with a strip of cable insulation, and the calm, tired eyes of someone who had repaired too many machines that should have been replaced decades ago. He carried tools the way soldiers carry sidearms, slept 4 hours a cycle, and drank a black human chemical that smelled like burned soil and bad decisions. He had been aboard Meridian Spindle for 2 months. In those 2 months, he had fixed 13 pressure faults, rewired a diplomatic climate suite, while 2 delegates were actively threatening each other with ceremonial blades, saved the station's waste reclamation plant from backing up into the luxury ring, and taught half the maintenance crew human curse words with alarming enthusiasm. He also made friends with Nalo. Nalo was a Sonari. Sonari are small, soft-boned, bioluminescent beings from ocean moons where predators are rare, currents are gentle, and social conflict is resolved through synchronized singing. They are brilliant at harmonics, navigation, and emotional translation. They are not built for emergency repair work in industrial sections full of pressure doors, magnetic locks, and coolant lines that can freeze flesh solid in under 5 seconds. Nalo was 5 feet tall if they stretched, with silver blue skin, wide black eyes, and glowing patterns along their arms that shifted with mood. When happy, they shimmered teal. When frightened, pale white. When embarrassed, a frantic violet that made them look like a malfunctioning advertisement. They were assigned to traffic resonance, which meant they listened to the station's navigation fields and detected distortions before computers could identify them. Most species found this strange. Humans, apparently, found it fascinating. Elias met Nalo during a minor gravity shear in Docking Arc 4. Everyone else was screaming at the automated stabilizers. Nalo stood in the middle of the control pit, trembling, whispering that the field sounded wrong. Elias was the only one who asked, "Wrong how?" Nalo explained. Elias listened. Then he crawled under the main routing console, bypassed 3 safety locks with what appeared to be a spoon, and stopped a freighter from rotating sideways through a passenger bridge. After that, they were inseparable. They ate together in the maintenance mess. Nalo taught Elias Sonari tone codes. Elias taught Nalo how to throw a wrench accurately at a wall panel that refused to open. They took late-cycle walks through the observation spine, where Nalo would hum to the star and Elias would complain that the station sounded like an old refrigerator having a spiritual crisis. I recorded this because small friendships in large stations often prevent large paperwork later. I did not know I was documenting the beginning of a legend. The first warning came at 06:12 station time. A tremor passed through Meridian Spindle. Not physical, not exactly. The lights did not flicker. The floor did not move. But every Lithari aboard felt it in our bones. A pressure change too subtle for most species, like the station had inhaled and forgotten how to exhale. Nalo felt it too. They were in resonance control, surrounded by glowing navigation columns, listening to the invisible music of gravity lanes. I was there auditing storm prediction logs because the Vare pulse window was still supposed to be 29 hours away, and the council wanted reassurance. Councils always want reassurance. It makes them feel involved. Nalo suddenly went white, not pale, white. Their glow vanished so completely that for one terrible second, I thought they had died standing up. "Recorder Ithrek," they whispered. I looked up from my datapad. "Yes? The star is singing backwards." That sentence was not in any emergency manual. Before I could ask what it meant, Commander Jorath entered resonance control with 6 officers behind him. Jorath was a Kralvine, and the Kralvine are one of those species that built their civilization around the belief that being large and loud is a form of moral authority. He stood nearly 8 feet tall, with a ridged skull, heavy tusks, and shoulders broad enough to block 2 doorways at once. His uniform was always immaculate. His empathy had never been located. He was the station's security commander and acting traffic authority, while the permanent director attended a trade summit in the inner ring. This was unfortunate for everyone. "Nalo of Senar," Jorath said, voice like a cargo lift grinding through bone. "You submitted a priority anomaly alert." Nalo swallowed. Their arm patterns flickered in jagged lines. "Yes, Commander. The resonance field is destabilizing. The next Vare pulse is not 29 hours away. It is much closer." "How much closer?" Nalo turned to the navigation column. "I do not know. The sound is folded. The storm is hiding behind the old prediction model." Jorath stared at them. I knew that look. It was the expression officials use when reality becomes inconvenient. "The prediction model is certified by the Heliarch Navigation Institute," Jorath said. "It has functioned without error for 82 years. Nalo's voice became smaller. "Then it is wrong for the first time." One of Jorath's officers snorted. The sound made Nalo flinch. Jorath stepped closer. "Do you understand what happens if I close the traffic corridors on the basis of a junior Sonari technician's feelings?" "It is not a feeling," Nalo said. "It is resonance displacement. Do you have mathematical confirmation?" "Not yet." "Do you have visual stellar confirmation?" "No." "Do you have a secondary certified observer?" Nalo looked at me. I immediately wished to become furniture. I checked the logs. The numbers were strange, yes, but not conclusive. Slight harmonics, mild instability, nothing that would convince command to delay hundreds of ships and anger 3 governments. "I have incomplete irregularities," I said carefully. Jorath's tusks lifted in satisfaction. "Then we do not have an emergency. We have anxiety." Nalo's glow trembled. That was when Elias walked in. He was carrying a pressure valve in one hand and a half-eaten nutrient bar in the other. His maintenance jacket was open. There was coolant frost on his boots and a burn mark across one sleeve. He looked at Nalo, then at Jorath, then at the officers. "What happened?" he asked. Jorath did not turn. "This is command business." Elias took one bite of the nutrient bar and kept chewing. "Humans have many forms of disrespect. Silence is one. Chewing during intimidation is apparently another." Nalo spoke quickly. "The storm is early. I think the station model is blind to it. Elias stopped chewing. That was the first time I saw his expression change. Not fear, not panic. Attention. Complete, absolute attention. He put the pressure valve down gently on the floor. "How early?" he asked. "I cannot tell," Nalo said. "The harmonics are overlapping, but the star is wrong." Elias nodded once, as if this explanation made perfect sense. Then he turned to Jorath. "Shut the corridors." Several officers laughed. Elias did not look at them. Jorath turned slowly. "Engineer Rowe, you are not authorized to make traffic recommendations." Good thing that wasn't a recommendation. The room became very still. Jorath lowered his head. "Careful, human." Elias met his eyes. "If Nalo says the field is wrong, the field is wrong." Jorath smiled. Kralveen's smiles are mostly tusks and threat. "You trust a Senari song over certified instruments? I trust the person who hears the station better than your instruments do." Nalo's glow flickered teal for less than a second. Jorath saw it and hated it. "You humans," he said, "bond too quickly. It compromises judgment." Elias stepped closer, not aggressively, just enough to make every officer notice. "No," he said quietly, "it improves it." Jorath dismissed the alert. Officially, the anomaly was classified as unverified sensory distress. Traffic continued. Docking operations continued. The station remained open. I filed a cautionary addendum. It was locked pending review within 6 minutes. I remember thinking that was fast. I remember thinking someone did not want this examined. That thought saved my life later. At 0940, Bay 12 reported a coolant pressure imbalance. Bay 12 was an old industrial dock on the lower rotation arc, used mostly by freighters hauling mineral slurry, emergency tanks, and things too ugly or too unstable for the diplomatic ports. It was loud, cold, badly lit, and unpopular with everyone except maintenance crews who enjoyed suffering professionally. Elias was assigned to the fault. Nalo went with him. They should not have. Resonance technicians do not belong in industrial bays during pressure warnings, but Nalo insisted that the coolant lines were carrying the same folded harmonic they had heard in the star. Elias argued for 30 seconds, realized arguing with a frightened Senari who believed everyone was in danger was useless, handed them a thermal harness and said, "Stay behind me." I know this because I reviewed the corridor footage later. At 0958, Elias and Nalo entered Bay 12. At 10:03, internal sensors began dropping. At 10:04, the bay doors sealed. At 10:05, Commander Jorath ordered an emergency lockdown, citing uncontained coolant instability. At 10:06, the external venting sequence began. I was in the incident room when the red symbols appeared. Bay 12 was being purged. Purging is simple, brutal, but simple. If a bay contains a volatile leak, fire, toxin, or pressure hazard, the station seals it and opens the outer vents. Everything inside is thrown into space. Equipment can be replaced. Cargo can be insured. People are supposed to be evacuated first. That last part matters. I pulled up the life sign registry. 2 signals remained in Bay 12, Elias Rowe, Nalo of center. My skin went transparent with fear, which is embarrassing but biologically honest. I opened a command channel. "Control, there are still 2 life signs inside the bay." Jorath's voice answered. "Negative. Bay 12 personnel cleared." "I am looking at the registry. Registry is malfunctioning due to coolant interference. The signals are moving." A pause. Then Jorath said, "Purge continues." That was when I understood this was not incompetence, it was choice. On the security feed, Bay 12 was a nightmare of steam and blue warning lights. Coolant vapor poured from cracked lines. Magnetic containers shook on their restraints. The outer doors vibrated as vacuum pressure built beyond them. Elias stood at a manual junction box with frost forming on his face shield, both hands inside the panel. Nalo was on the floor behind him, one leg trapped under a collapsed conduit. They were alive. They were visible. Everyone could see them. And still the purge countdown continued. "Commander," I said, trying to keep my voices from splitting. "Lithari have too when terrified. You must abort. They are inside." Jorath turned toward the incident room glass. His eyes found mine. "I am containing a station hazard," he said. "There are people in there. There are 14,000 people aboard this station. I will not risk them for a maintenance contractor and a resonance clerk." The countdown reached 30 seconds. In Bay 12, Elias looked up at a wall display. He saw the purge timer. He saw the locked doors. Then he looked at Nalo. Nalo was trying to free their leg, hands shaking, glow flashing white in frantic pulses. Elias left the junction box. For one mad second, I thought he had given up. Instead, he crossed the bay, knelt beside Nalo, and put one gloved hand against their helmet. The external microphone was damaged. The audio crackled, but I caught the words, "Breathe with me." Nalo shook their head. "Look at me," Elias said. "Not the door, not the timer, me." 20 seconds. Nalo's glow flickered wildly. Elias jammed a pry tool under the conduit. It did not move. He changed angle, planted one boot against a support bracket, and pulled. The conduit was rated at 400 kilograms. Humans are not supposed to lift 400 kilograms. Elias did not lift it. He shifted it. 1 centimeter. Enough. Nalo dragged their leg free. 10 seconds. Elias grabbed them and ran. Not to the main door, not to the service lock, to the waste heat intake. I had reviewed Bay 12 schematics hundreds of times. The waste heat intake was not an exit. It was a narrow maintenance throat that led into a thermal exchange shaft too hot for most species and too cramped for emergency suits. Elias hit the intake cover with the pry tool. Once, twice. The cover bent. 5 seconds. He shoved Nalo inside first. 3 seconds. The outer bay vents opened. The atmosphere exploded outward. Elias was halfway into the intake when vacuum took him. I saw his body snap backward like a rope had caught him around the spine. His boots left the floor. One hand vanished into the intake, gripping an internal rung. The other hand slapped against the metal lip, fingers scraping frost. The purge dragged everything loose toward space. Containers tore free. Tools spun. A cargo sled smashed into the far wall and vanished through the vent aperture. Elias held on. A human hand is a small thing. 5 fingers, soft skin, fragile bones. That hand held against vacuum, ice, flying debris, and the full atmospheric loss of an industrial bay for 7 impossible seconds. Then Nalo reached from inside the shaft, wrapped both arms around his wrist, and pulled. They were small. They were injured. They had no strength by galactic standards, but Elias had gotten them far enough. Together, inch by inch, they vanished into the heat intake. Bay 12 emptied into space. The feed went gray. For 13 seconds, no one spoke. Then Jorath exhaled. Purge complete. Hazard contained. I looked at the life sign registry. Both signals remained. Faint, moving, alive. Something changed in the room then. Not visibly. No one shouted. No one accused. No weapons were drawn. But every officer who had watched the purge looked at Commander Jorath differently. And Commander Jorath knew it. He leaned toward me. "Recorder Valine," he said softly. "You will mark those life signs as sensor echoes. The purge removed all personnel." I stared at him. My species has survived for 90,000 years by obeying dangerous creatures, but I had just watched a human refuse vacuum. So I said the bravest thing I had ever said. "No." Jorath's eyes narrowed. Before he could answer, the station screamed. Not metaphorically. Every alarm on Meridian Spindle activated at once. The lights turned deep violet. Gravity stuttered. A pressure wave passed through the hull so powerful that the incident room glass cracked from corner to corner. Across every display, the storm prediction model collapsed. Vare had awakened early, and the first pulse was 12 minutes away. Panic is supposed to be loud. This panic was silent for 3 full seconds because every mind aboard Meridian Spindle reached the same conclusion at once and refused to accept it. A Vare pulse was not a normal storm. It was a stellar convulsion, a burst of magnetized radiation that twisted navigation fields, overloaded shield grids, and turned jump drives into bombs if they were active at the wrong moment. The station had one purpose: predict those pulses early enough to clear traffic and reinforce shielding. We had not cleared traffic. We had not reinforced shielding. 900 ships were docked or queued. 14,000 civilians were aboard, and our one technician who believed the warning had just been purged into a thermal shaft. That was when Elias Rowe became more important than every officer on the station. The first message came through a maintenance channel full of static. "Control, this is Rowe." No one moved. His voice was ragged, breathless, distorted by suit damage. "Bay 12 purge failed to kill us. Appreciate the effort. Nalo's hurt. I need medical access and a hardline to storm routing." Jorath lunged for the console. "Cut that channel." I moved faster. Lithari are not brave, but we have excellent fingers. I copied the transmission to Emergency Public Archive before the commander's officer could mute it, which meant every active command terminal aboard Meridian Spindle heard the next words. Nalo's voice came through, weak but clear. "The star is not early. The model was edited." The room froze. Jorath stopped moving. Elias coughed. "Say that again, Nalo." "The prediction model was edited," Nalo whispered. "Someone folded the resonance curve. The storm did not hide. We were made blind. There are sentences that do not merely create trouble. They open doors underneath it." Across the incident room, Admiral Sereth appeared on the main comm display from the inner diplomatic ring. She was Varun, silver-feathered, cold-eyed, and old enough to have ended 2 border wars with patience alone. "Commander Jorath," she said. "Explain." Jorath straightened. "Admiral, the human engineer is concussed and the Sonari technician is compromised by stress. We must prioritize storm response." Elias laughed once. It was not a happy sound. "Funny, that's exactly what I'm doing." A new feed appeared on my console. Elias had plugged his suit cable into a maintenance hardline somewhere inside the heat exchange shaft. His camera flickered on. He looked terrible. His face shield was cracked. Blood floated inside his helmet in tiny red beads. One side of his jaw was swelling. His right glove was torn open across the knuckles, and 2 fingers bent at angles fingers should not consider. Behind him, Nalo lay strapped to a service panel, legs sealed in emergency foam, glow dim but steady. Elias lifted a small diagnostic chip toward the camera. "I pulled this from the coolant junction before the purge," he said. "It's not station hardware." Jorath said nothing. Admiral Sereth leaned closer. "What is it?" "A phase parasite," Elias said. "Tiny little bastard. It was feeding false data into the local grid and masking heat buildup, but it also had a command handshake tied into the storm model." He looked off screen. "Nalo?" Nalo closed their eyes. "The harmonic signature matches command-level access." Everyone looked at Jorath. Jorath's tusks lowered. "You are wasting time," he said. "The pulse arrives in less than 11 minutes. "For once," Elias said, "we agree." Then he did something no one expected. He stopped accusing the man who had tried to kill him. He started saving everyone. "Storm routing is corrupted," Elias said. "Automated shields are going to reinforce along the old prediction geometry. That will leave docking Arc 3 exposed and overload Arc 7. If we let the system run, we lose at least 200 ships and maybe the lower habitat ring." Admiral Sereth did not blink. "Can it be corrected?" "Yes." A dozen officers exhaled. Then Elias added, "Not from command." They inhaled again. "The central routing core is rejecting remote changes. The parasite left a checksum lock. Someone has to go physically into the storm relay spine and manually realign the shield harmonics." One of the engineers behind me made a choked noise. The storm relay spine ran through the station's outer hull, inside a narrow service corridor between radiation baffles. During a Vare pulse, it became one of the most dangerous places on the station. Even before a pulse, leakage exposure could sterilize most species through armor. Admiral Sareth asked the necessary question. Who can do it? Elias looked directly into his damaged camera. I can? Jorath laughed. You can barely stand. Good thing crawling is an option. The relay spine is flooded with hard radiation. Humans are annoyingly tolerant. You will die. Eventually, Elias said, but not in the next 10 minutes. That sentence spread through Meridian Spindle like fire, not because it was dramatic, because he meant it. There was no pride in his voice, no performance, no hero speech. He sounded like a man looking at a leaking pipe and deciding it still had to be fixed, even if the pipe happened to be wrapped around a dying star. Admiral Sareth looked at the medical readings from his suit. Her feathers tightened. Engineer Rowe, your oxygen line is unstable. Your right hand is damaged. Your exposure levels are already above safe limits. Safe limits are suggestions written by people not currently in a heat shaft. Can Nalo assist remotely? Nalo tried to push themselves upright. Elias immediately placed one hand on their shoulder. No, he said. Nalo's glow flared. Elias. No. I can hear the alignment. You can hear it from here. The relay manual controls need tone timing. Then sing it to me. Nalo stared at him. Even through the cracked feed, even with alarm screaming and death approaching at stellar velocity, I saw the fear in their eyes. I might be wrong, Nalo said. Elias's expression softened. You were right when nobody listened. That does not mean I will be right again. No, Elias said. It means we're going to listen properly this time. That was humanity, I think, not certainty. Trust in the face of terror. Elias left Nalo in the heat shaft junction with a medical beacon, tied his suit cable around his waist because his magnetic boots were unreliable, and started climbing toward the relay spine. The whole station watched. By then, the transmission had spread beyond command control. Maintenance crews opened it on wall displays. Docked ship captains patched into emergency channels. Civilians in shelters saw the human crawl through a glowing service tunnel while the storm countdown dropped below 9 minutes. No one ordered it broadcast. No one stopped it either. Jorath tried once. Admiral Sareth overrode him without looking away from the feed. Elias moved slowly, too slowly. Every meter was a negotiation with pain. The shaft narrowed until his shoulders scraped both sides. Heat shimmered around him. Radiation static crawled across the camera. Twice, the feed cut out completely. Twice, it returned to show him still moving. Nalo sang through the channel, not music as humans understand it. Sonari resonance tones are layered, mathematical, alive with meaning. The sound slid through the comms like light through water. It told him when to pause, when to turn, when to brace, when the station's invisible fields bent too close to his bones. At 7 minutes, the first outer shield capacitor failed. Docking Arc 3 lost stabilization. Ships began breaking moorings. A grain hauler named Vagrant Mercy drifted sideways toward a refugee transport carrying 600 sleeping children from the Tal Avar famine belt. Automated tugs would normally correct it, but the storm interference had blinded half the dock grid. Control shouted orders. No one had a clean solution. Then a maintenance chief from Arc 3 came over the channel. Her name was Braca. She was Dor, built like a walking engine block and famous for hating everyone equally. Engineer Rowe, she barked. Your bypass in the waste reclamation plant last month. Can it handle tug rerouting? Elias was hanging from a ladder inside the relay spine, breathing like broken machinery. Which bypass? The ugly one. That doesn't narrow it down. The one labeled temporary, do not touch. Yes, I mean you, Braca. Despite everything, someone in the incident room laughed. Elias closed his eyes for half a second. Yes. Cross-link tug controls through sanitation pump relays. You'll get 6 seconds of thrust before the pumps trip. 6 is enough. Braca rerouted the tugs through waste systems. For 6 seconds, every sanitation alarm on Docking Arc 3 declared catastrophic plumbing betrayal. Also for 6 seconds, the tugs fired. The Vagrant Mercy missed the refugee transport by 4 meters. 4 meters. 600 children kept breathing because a human had once fixed a toilet badly enough to save a ship later. That is not a sentence I expected to write in an official record. At 6 minutes, Elias reached the first manual relay. It was a triangular console buried behind a radiation shield that had jammed halfway open. He tried to pull it. His right hand failed. The broken fingers would not close. He stared at them, almost offended. Then he used his left hand, teeth, and shoulder. The shield moved. Slowly, the relay console emerged. Nalo's song changed. First alignment, they whispered. 3 pulses low, 1 long, 2 rising. Wait for the echo. Elias placed his left hand on the controls. Talk me through it. Nalo sang. Elias followed. The shield map shifted. A cheer rose somewhere in the station, then died immediately as another alarm sounded. The system rejected the alignment. Checksum lock. Elias looked at the console. Of course. Admiral Sereth's voice remained steady. Problem? The sabotage key is still active. Manual controls can move the shield, but the corrupted model keeps pulling it back. Can you disable the key? Probably. How? Elias looked down the relay spine. The camera turned with him. At the far end of the corridor was the primary harmonic regulator, glowing behind a cage of golden conductors. It was not meant to be touched while active. It was not meant to be approached while active. It was certainly not meant to be opened by a half-frozen, bleeding human with one working hand. By doing something stupid, Elias said. Jorath stepped forward. Admiral, this is absurd. He is improvising under trauma. We should transfer control to certified command staff. Certified command staff did not detect the sabotage, Admiral Sereth said, because there is no confirmed sabotage. That was when I spoke again. My voice shook, but I spoke. There is. Every eye turned to me. My hearts attempted to leave through my throat. I sent the archived logs to the main display, the altered report, the locked addendum, the purge order with life signs still registered, the command-level access trail attached to the edited storm model. It was not complete proof, but it was enough. Admiral Sereth read it in 5 seconds. Jorath read his future in 3. You cowardly little recorder, he whispered. I was too afraid to reply. Elias did it for me. Hey, Commander! Jorath turned toward the feed. Elias's face filled the cracked display. Blood smeared across one cheek, eyes bright with pain and something harder. When this is over, you and I are going to have a very administrative conversation. Not violent, not loud, administrative. Somehow it was worse. Jorath drew his sidearm. Every security officer in the room drew theirs on him. That is the thing about betrayal during an emergency. Timing matters. If Jorath had moved earlier, fear might have protected him. But now the station had watched a human crawl toward death while their commander tried to silence the proof. Fear changed sides. Jorath froze. Admiral Sereth spoke softly. Commander Jorath, you are relieved. His tusks trembled. You do not understand what is coming. That sentence chilled me more than the alarms, because he did not sound defeated. He sounded vindicated. Then the mid-story truth arrived, and every disaster before it became small. Nalo screamed, not in pain, in recognition. Their glow flashed so bright it overexposed the camera. The storm is not the weapon, they cried. It is the door. The room erupted. Admiral Sereth snapped. Explain. Nalo's voice shook. The edited model did not just hide the pulse. It shaped our shields. It is using Meridian Spindle as a resonance lens. Elias went still. Even injured, even half-blind from radiation, he understood first. Lens for what? Nalo whispered. A fleet. Space outside Meridian Spindle tore open. One moment, the dead star burned alone beyond the station windows. The next, black ships emerged from the folded edge of the storm. Not many, that would have been easier. Only 17. Long, narrow vessels with no running lights, no registry beams, no diplomatic codes. Their hulls were matte and segmented like pieces of night cut into blades. They rode the coming pulse inside its magnetic shadow, invisible to every sensor that trusted the corrupted model. The old stories called them the Veil. Most civilized governments called those stories superstition. Refugee worlds called them harvesters. The Veil did not conquer planets. They harvested infrastructure, stations, shipyards, relay hubs, places where species gathered and depended on systems they did not understand. They would arrive during disaster, seize control, strip data cores, take prisoners useful for labor or study, and leave survivors fighting over wreckage. Meridian Spindle had not been sabotaged to explode. It had been sabotaged to open the gate. Joreth began to laugh. Security slammed him against the wall. He did not resist. "You cannot stop them," he said. "No one stops them. I gave them one station to spare 3 colonies. Admiral Sereth's feathers lifted in horror. "You made a bargain. I made a calculation." Elias's voice came through the channel, quiet and flat. "Bad math." The Veil fleet accelerated. The Veil pulse was 4 minutes away. Meridian Spindle was full of civilians, docked ships, broken shields, and one human inside the machine the enemy needed. That last part turned out to be important. "Elias," Nalo said, breath-catching. "The regulator. If they need the station as a lens, we break the lens." Admiral Sereth cut in. "Consequence?" Nalo closed their eyes, listening to impossible harmonics. "If done incorrectly, the shield grid collapses and the pulse kills us." "And if done correctly?" Nalo looked at Elias through the feed. "We aim the pulse." Silence. A dead star was about to release enough energy to cripple fleets. The Veil had planned to use Meridian Spindle to guide themselves through it. A human engineer and an injured Sonari had just suggested turning the station into a cannon. Admiral Sereth asked, "Can the structure survive that?" Every engineer in the room said no at the same time. Elias said, "Parts of it can." Braca from Arc 3 snarled over the comm. "Which parts? The parts we reinforce? With what?" "Everything we've got." And then Meridian Spindle stopped being a station. It became a species test, not of strength, not of technology, of trust. Elias began giving orders, and the strange thing is, people followed them, not because he outranked them, because he understood the machine. He told docked freighters to dump inert cargo into exterior shield gaps. Merchant captains screamed about compensation until Admiral Sereth opened a public channel and said the words, "survival priority." They dumped the cargo. He told luxury yachts to surrender their decorative gravity stabilizers. They protested until the refugee transport offered its life support reserves first. Then shame did what command could not. He told engineers from 6 species to cut safeties their manuals said must never be cut. They hesitated until Braca shouted, "The human is dying in a wall for us. Move." They moved. He told medical ships to extend biofield nets around the habitat ring. They said the nets were for organic tissue, not station hulls. Elias said, "Today the station is organic enough." No one had a better argument. Nalo sang alignment codes through tears. Their voice became the pulse of the station. Every species heard it differently. To my ears it was grief woven through mathematics. To the door it sounded like hammer rhythms. To the Varun, a battle hymn. To humans, I later learned, it sounded like someone holding a note just before it broke. Elias crawled into the primary regulator cage. The radiation warnings turned black. Not red, black. Black means the system has stopped advising caution and begun recording evidence for whoever finds the remains. His suit alarms begged him to retreat. He muted them. Nalo saw. "Do not mute your warnings," they said. "They're being pessimistic." Elias, "I know. You always say that when you do not know." He smiled faintly. "Then you know me pretty well." Nalo's glow dimmed. "You should not be there." "Probably not." You will not survive full contact with the regulator. Then I won't do full contact. The camera shifted. His plan became visible. He had wrapped his damaged suit cable around 3 conductor posts, tied the other end through a manual crank, and anchored it to his own harness. He was going to use his body as a tension brace. Every engineer watching understood at once. The regulator's alignment ring was jammed. It needed continuous pressure while the pulse passed, or the shield lens would snap back into its sabotaged configuration. A machine could not be installed in time. A support arm could not be fabricated in time. A human body, wedged in exactly the wrong place, might hold long enough. Admiral Sareth said, "Engineer Rowe, that is not authorized." Elias grunted as he tightened the cable. "Put it in my performance review. That load will tear you apart. Only if my knots are bad." "Elias," Nalo said, and this time their voice broke. He stopped working. For the first time since the purge, his expression changed completely. The engineer vanished. The tired human remained. "Hey," he said softly, "look at me." Nalo shook with silent light. "You got me this far," Elias said. "You heard what nobody else heard. You saved the station before anyone knew it needed saving." "No. Yes. I only heard the danger. That counts. I cannot hold the tone if you die." "Then don't let me die until after." It was absurd, cruel, human. Nalo laughed once through a sob, and the sound steadied their song. The Veil opened fire at 2 minutes. Their weapons were not bright beams or missiles. They fired absence. Sections of shield simply stopped existing where their shots landed, erased from the grid for fractions of a second. One shot clipped docking Arc 9 and peeled armor from the outer rim like fruit skin. Ships screamed. People prayed. Meridian Spindle shook so hard that my recording console tore loose from its mount and struck the floor. The vagrant Mercy, the grain hauler saved earlier by sanitation tugs, rotated out of dock without clearance. Its captain, a gravel-voiced Thurn female named Osk, broadcast across all channels. "Spindle, this is Vagrant Mercy. Our hold is empty. Our engines are ugly. Our hull is insured. Where do you need mass?" Admiral Sareth understood. "Captain, do not." Osk ignored her. "Human engineer, where do you need mass?" Elias looked at the shield map. "Between Vial 3 and the habitat ring." "That is not a location. That is a suicide note." "Yeah. Good enough." The Vagrant Mercy burned its engines and placed itself between the Vial and the civilians. It took 3 absent shots. The first removed its forward shield. The second opened its cargo spine. The third should have killed it. Instead, hundreds of grain containers vented from the broken hull, scattering dense metallic chaff across the Veil targeting path. The next enemy volley hit the cloud and dispersed. The Vagrant Mercy spun away, burning, alive by stubbornness and poor design. Humans do not own stubbornness. They are simply contagious with it. At 90 seconds, 3 more civilian ships broke formation and joined the shield line. At 80 seconds, the door maintenance crews manually locked the outer ring braces from inside exposed compartments. At 70 seconds, the Sonari delegation began singing with Nalo, adding resonant stability from the shelter decks. At 60 seconds, every species aboard Meridian Spindle was doing something impossible because one human had made impossible look like the next available option. Elias braced himself inside the regulator. His left arm was wrapped through the crank. His boots were locked against the cage. The cable crossed his chest like a harness. His damaged right hand hung useless at his side. "Nalo," he said, "on your mark." Nalo sang. The station answered. The Veer pulse arrived. There are no proper words for it. Light became weight. Sound became pressure. Space folded around the station in a blue-white wave that made every display go blind. For one infinite second, Meridian Spindle stood between a dead star and a hunter fleet, and every law of engineering filed a formal complaint. The regulator tried to snap back. Elias held. His scream tore through the open channel. I wish I could say he was silent. Heroes in official records are often silent. It is cleaner, easier to admire. Elias screamed because he was alive, because pain is real, because courage is not the absence of agony, but the refusal to let agony make the decision. The cable tightened across his suit. The crank bent. His left shoulder dislocated. The regulator moved 1 degree. Nalo's song rose. The sonari joined. Then the whole station joined in the only way it could. Engines fired. Gravity nets flexed. Cargo mass shifted. Shield fragments realigned. The broken, ugly, overworked machine called Meridian Spindle accepted the human body wedged in its heart and became something new for 12 seconds. A lens, a shield, a weapon. The Vare pulse struck the station and bent. It curved through the manually aligned grid, gathered along the cargo-reinforced arcs, amplified through the stolen luxury stabilizers, focused by sonari resonance, and launched outward in a spear of dead star fire. The Viel fleet had no time to run. The first 5 ships vanished, not exploded, vanished. Outlines burned into the darkness and then gone. 4 more spun apart as their shadow drives overloaded. The rest tried to fold back into the storm, but Nalo heard them. Their song sharpened, guiding the pulse correction by fractions so tiny no instrument could have measured them in time. Elias pulled once more. The regulator shifted 1/2 degree. The pulse caught the fleeing ship's broadside. 17 hunter vessels entered the Vare storm. 2 wrecks drifted out. Neither had power, neither had weapons. Meridian Spindle survived. Barely. Docking Arc 9 was open to vacuum. 3 habitat sections were dark. The lower ring had lost gravity. Over 400 injuries flooded medical. Fires burned in places fires had no atmospheric right to exist, but the station survived. The civilians survived. The refugee children survived. Nalo survived. For 8 seconds after the pulse passed, there was no signal from Elias. No camera, no audio, no life sign. Nalo stopped singing. That silence was the worst sound I have ever heard. Then Braca's voice came over maintenance comms. "I have him." The camera returned from a door helmet feed. Braca had reached the regulator cage with a rescue team. The metal was warped. The conductor posts had melted into twisted gold. The manual crank had snapped. Elias hung in the cable harness, limp, suit blackened, visor dark. Braca cut him free with hands that could crush stone and held him like something fragile. "Medical," she said, voice suddenly small. "Now." The next hours blurred. I recorded them because that was my duty, but I do not remember them as records. I remember fragments. Nalo refusing treatment until they saw Elias taken into surgery. Admiral Sereth standing in the command pit, feathers scorched, personally coordinating evacuation routes. Jorath in restraints, silent now, no longer laughing. Civilians emerging from shelters and staring at the displays showing the wreckage of the Vale fleet. Maintenance crews painting human handprints on damaged bulkheads for luck. The captain of Vagrant Mercy demanding a tow and then asking quietly whether the human made it. For 17 hours, Elias Rowe was listed as critical. Humans are strange in medicine. Their bodies break in dramatic, inefficient ways. They bleed too much. Their organs complain constantly. Their bones are strong until they are not. Their nervous systems overload, shut down, restart, and then somehow ask for water. Elias had radiation burns, vacuum exposure damage, a dislocated shoulder, fractured ribs, a torn hand, internal bleeding, suit trauma, and what the human medical consultant described as a medically unreasonable amount of stubbornness. He should have died, several times. He declined. On the 2nd day, Nalo was wheeled into the recovery ward, despite 3 separate doctors insisting they rest. Elias was awake, barely, one eye swollen, voice reduced to gravel, left arm immobilized, right hand wrapped in regrowth mesh. Nalo glowed dim blue beside the bed. "You look terrible," they whispered. Elias turned his head a fraction. "You should see the other guys." Nalo made a sound between laughter and grief. Then they touched their forehead gently to his uninjured hand. "You held the station together," Nalo said. Elias closed his eyes. "No," he whispered. "We did." That line appeared on every memorial wall, every relief fund banner, every reconstruction broadcast that followed. He hated that. Humans often dislike becoming symbols. They will perform impossible acts under pressure and then become deeply uncomfortable when anyone wants to discuss them afterward. Elias kept insisting he was just the guy in the right duct. No one believed him. The investigation lasted 6 weeks. I testified for 11 hours. My species considers 11 hours of testimony a form of cardio. Jorath's bargain with the Veil was exposed in detail. He had been contacted after the Cralvine border colonies received threats. Deliver Meridian Spindle as a harvest point, and the Veil would spare his people's outer settlements. He called it sacrifice. Admiral Sereth called it treason. Elias, when asked for comment, said, "Still bad math." That became popular too. The Heliarch Navigation Institute denied responsibility for the corrupted storm model until Nalo demonstrated the folded harmonic in a public hearing and made 3 senior model architects resign with one song. The Institute then issued a formal apology, updated 82 years of prediction software, and created a new certified role for Sonari resonance auditors. The first auditor badge was offered to Nalo. They accepted only after insisting the title include Field Authority, because Elias told them never to accept responsibility without power. Station regulations changed. Emergency purges now require biometric confirmation from independent life sign systems. Maintenance staff received authority to challenge command decisions during infrastructure failure. Civilian engineers were granted direct emergency access to shield routing if certified systems were compromised. Everyone called these reforms the Rowe Protocols. Elias called them things that should already have been rules. The cultural changes were harder to measure but easier to see. Before the incident, humans were classified aboard Meridian Spindle as high-endurance technical personnel from a moderate death world with unusual social bonding tendencies. Afterward, the classification was revised. Human personnel are not merely durable. They are relationally driven crisis amplifiers. That was the official phrase. It means that when a human decides someone is theirs to protect, their problem-solving ability becomes extremely inconvenient for whatever is causing the danger. Other species began studying human emergency behavior with new seriousness. There were lectures. Many lectures. The Varun War College produced a 12-part analysis of Elias's improvised shield lens strategy and concluded that 90% of his actions violated established doctrine, while 100% of them were necessary. The Door Engineering Guild added a new exam question. A human proposes a structurally unsound emergency bypass under lethal time pressure. List 3 reasons they may be correct. The Sonari composed a morning victory hymn for Meridian Spindle that required 17 singers, a gravity bowl, and 1 human coffee grinder for percussion because Nalo insisted the song needed Elias's horrible machine sound. Elias attended the first performance. He cried quietly, pretended he was coughing. No one corrected him. 3 months after the Vare Pulse, Meridian Spindle reopened partial traffic. The damaged arcs were still under repair. Half the station smelled like heated metal and sealant foam. Docking was limited. Politicians arrived to make speeches beside the safest-looking wreckage. Elias tried to avoid all ceremonies. He failed. Nalo found him hiding in a maintenance crawl space above Observation Deck 2, where he was supposedly checking vent flow. "You are avoiding the dedication," Nalo said. Elias lay on his back with a scanner on his chest. "I am performing vital airflow diagnostics." "You are wearing formal boots in a ventilation shaft." "Could be formal airflow." Nalo's glow turned amused teal. Stronger now, brighter than before the incident. "You have to come down." "No, I don't." "They are naming the repaired relay spine." "Absolutely not. They are waiting." "They can keep waiting." Nalo climbed halfway into the crawl space, which was impressive given their still healing leg. Elias sighed. "That is emotionally manipulative." "Yes," Nalo said. "I learned from a human." He looked at them. Then he laughed. Not much. Just enough. He came down. The dedication was not grand in the way officials wanted. Admiral Sareth spoke. Representatives spoke. The Heliarch Institute apologized again with great dignity and minimal sincerity. Then Nalo walked to the podium. They were small beneath the lights, smaller than the officers behind them, smaller than the flags, smaller than the huge window showing Vare's dead blue glow. But when they began to speak, the whole deck went silent. "I heard a storm," Nalo said. "I was afraid. I warned Command, and Command did not listen. I thought that meant my fear was useless." They looked at Elias. One human listened, not because I had rank, not because I had proof, not because I was important to the station. He listened because I was important to him. Elias looked at the floor. Nalo continued, "I have studied humans since then. Their histories are full of disasters, floods, fires, wars, plagues, broken ships, starving cities, collapsing worlds. Again and again, humans survive not because they are unafraid, but because someone says, 'Hold on to me.'" Their glow brightened. Elias held a machine together, but before that, he held my fear with me. That is why we are alive. No one moved. Then Braca began striking one fist against her chest. A door respect beat. One by one, others joined. Kralvine officers who had served under Jorath, Varun diplomats, Senari singers, freight captains, refugee families, maintenance crews, even Lithari, though we bruise easily. The sound filled the observation deck like a second heartbeat. Elias stood very still. Humans can face vacuum better than gratitude, apparently. Afterward, when the crowds finally released him, Elias and Nalo walked to the repaired section of the relay spine. The new plaque was simple, not heroic, not dramatic, just names, all the injured, all the dead, all the crews who held the line. At the bottom, engraved in smaller letters, was a phrase from the final transmission before the pulse. "We're going to listen properly this time." Elias touched the words with his wrapped hand. Nalo stood beside him. For a long while, neither spoke. I watched from a respectful distance because I am still an incident recorder and, as previously established, an idiot. Elias finally said, "You know they'll forget some of this eventually." Nalo tilted their head. "Forget? Not all of it, but enough. People always do. They'll make rules, then shortcuts, then exceptions. Then some tired person will say the warning is probably nothing." Nalo's glow dimmed. Elias looked out at the star. "So, we remind them." "How?" He smiled faintly. "We keep fixing things loudly." That became his life, in a way. He stayed aboard Meridian Spindle, not because Command ordered it, not because he had no offers. He received hundreds. War colleges wanted him. Shipyards wanted him. 3 governments wanted him as a resilience consultant, whatever that means. A private defense firm offered enough credits to buy a moon. He refused all of them. Meridian Spindle still leaked. Nalo stayed too. Together, they built the first integrated resonance engineering response team. Senari listeners paired with human crisis engineers, door structural crews, Varun coordinators, Lithari recorders, and anyone else willing to admit that survival improves when pride is removed from the control room. Their first rule was simple: warnings are not insults. Their second rule was even simpler: check the duct. Within a year, stations across the border corridors adopted the model. Accidents dropped. Early storm detection improved. Sabotage became harder. Civilian technicians gained authority. Small species who had been dismissed as delicate or decorative suddenly found their senses, instincts, and perspectives written into emergency law. All because one human believed his friend. The galaxy loves to misunderstand humans. At first, we called them reckless because they ran toward danger. Then we called them violent because they fought when cornered. Then we called them irrational because they made decisions based on loyalty, grief, hope, love, and other variables our models struggled to quantify. But after Meridian Spindle, some of us began to understand. Humans are not reckless. They are responsible beyond reason once they decide the responsibility is theirs. They are not violent by nature. They are builders who become terrifying when something tries to destroy what they are building. They are not irrational. They simply include each other in the equation. That changes the math. Jorath thought saving 3 colonies justified sacrificing 1 station. The Veil thought fear would make thousands of people easy to harvest. The Heliarch models thought a star could be understood without listening to those who heard it differently. Everyone calculated, the human cared, and somehow, caring produced the better strategy. I saw Elias many times after that, usually in maintenance corridors, arguing with machines, sometimes in the mess, trading desserts with Nalo, sometimes sitting alone in the observation spine, flexing fingers that never fully healed, watching Vare glow in the distance. He never became less human. That is what surprised me most. I expected legends to become larger, colder, more distant. Elias became more tired, more sarcastic, more determined to label dangerous panels properly. He still drank burned soil. He still carried tools in every pocket. He still trusted Nalo's hearing before any official model. And when new recruits arrived, full of arrogance and polished certainty, the old crew told them the story, not the clean version, the real one. They told them about the Senari who heard the storm, the commander who chose betrayal, the recorder who finally said no while shaking hard enough to blur the feed, the freighter that used its own body as a shield, the station that sang, the human who crawled into a machine and held a star in place with a broken arm. Most recruits assumed the story was exaggerated. Then they met Elias. He would be in a corridor somewhere, kneeling beside an open panel, sleeves rolled up, scars visible along one wrist, muttering that whoever designed the valve layout deserved a strongly worded afterlife. Nalo would be beside him, humming softly, one hand against the wall, and every veteran on the station would lower their voice, not out of fear, out of respect, because the galaxy had learned something at Meridian Spindle. A human does not need command authority to change the outcome. A human does not need perfect tools. A human does not need certainty. Give them a reason. Give them someone to protect. Give them a problem everyone else has declared impossible. Then stand back. Not because they will always win. They know better than anyone that victory is never guaranteed. Stand back because they will try anyway. And that attempt has weight. It pulls others in. It wakes courage in species that thought courage belonged to warriors. It makes frightened recorders refuse lies. It makes injured singers hold the note. It makes freighter captains turn empty ships into shields. It makes whole stations remember they are not metal and policy and rotating gravity. They are people, messy, terrified, stubborn people. And people, when bound together correctly, can aim a dead star. End of record. Filed by Senior Incident Recorder Ithrek Valine, Meridian Spindle Reconstruction Archive, Cycle 443. Supplemental personal note attached against recommendation. If this record reaches any station, vessel, colony, council chamber, military academy, trade office, or maintenance bay where a human is currently being underestimated, update your assumptions immediately. Listen when they listen. Move when they move. And if a human looks at someone small, frightened, injured, or ignored and says, "Stay behind me," understand what has just happened. A line has been drawn, not on a map, not in law, somewhere much older. Cross it at your own risk. And if you believe stories like this deserve to travel farther than fear ever could, stay with HFY Stories Galaxy. The stars are dark, the void is wide, but humanity is still out there, holding the line.